Climate change is one of the biggest crises the planet has faced. While people do agree on its existence and importance, how to solve it is another problem entirely. A problem that needs to be addressed, or else more time that could be spent fixing the problem will be about arguing and bickering over exactly what to do. Many people will say that you need to take individual responsibility in looking out for the environment, often encouraging things such as reusable straws and actively recycling. While actions like these are helpful, relying on this alone hides the fact that the entire civilian and residential sector only produces 13% of all carbon emissions. The majority of carbon emissions comes from the transportation industry and most notably electricity production, for a total of 77% of all emissions. Companies that are constantly being subsidized with millions to keep producing fossil fuels over swapping to greener sources, companies that have become reliant on fossil fuels for the production of goods, and various companies that lobby to keep themselves profitable at the cost of the environment. The electricity sector alone is responsible for 25% of the emissions we see today, and is the second largest but the most well-known contributor to climate change. Oil and natural gas companies lobby politicians to get subsidies over swapping to greener sources of energy. To them, converting is not profitable and will not be done unless oil and gas becomes less profitable than their green counterparts, or if oil and gas can no longer be used due to restrictions from legislation. Sources such as nuclear, wind, solar, hydroelectric are more green and more than capable of solving the problems of climate change in the energy sector. Many industries that exist today are dependent on fossil fuels, and unlike energy, no solution is able to replace them yet. Since industry covers 23% of all emissions, finding ways to reduce the amount of emissions at the very least is important. Making processes more efficient and swapping to fossil fuels that don't emit as much CO2 when applicable, such as swapping to natural gas from coal. Recycling previous products instead of making new products can also greatly reduce the amount of emissions these industries create, such as reusing scrap steel or aluminum as opposed to processing more ore. Transportation, the largest CO2 emitter at 29% of total emissions, is one of the biggest areas of concern in climate change, but unlike the other two, could and would have been completely avoided otherwise. Lobbying efforts in urban planning by car and gas companies caused areas in America to become dependent on cars to transport when under other circumstances, public transportation or methods like walking and bike riding would not only have been much more viable, but also preferred. Investing in more public transportation such as trains, buses, and making cities much more compact instead of sprawled out will not only greatly reduce CO2 emissions, but also give civilians more money to spend on other needs such as medical bills. Other kinds of transport, like planes and ferries, can have electric parts replace combustion engines to eliminate their emissions completely. Each step towards solving climate change is a step in the right direction, but regulating the different companies that cause the overwhelming majority of emissions should be where the focus of environmental protection groups go if we want to have any substantial change and impact in saving the climate.